I see, Roger said. I was not aware that you had a brother named Jack. You never mentioned him in your interviews before. That's because I don't remember him very well. He died in Elkenay. I was only 5. That would explain why you never mentioned him before. I apologize. I've had so many interviews that it's hard to tell what has and hasn't been said before. Oh, don't feel the need to apologize. If anything, I'm honored that you chose this interview to be the one where you disclose this information, Roger said, chuckling politely. So anyway, I believe that we've spoken enough about the war. What about your time after? Specifically, I'm curious about your personal life. I believe we are all too familiar with how the Baron of Milwaukee, Wisconsin came into his fortune, so I think we can skip that part. Samuel was a little sad that he wouldn't be able to tell his favorite story. It was an exciting tale, a classic rags to riches fable that would inspire any red-blooded American to follow their dreams. One that someone might read in a novel written by the likes of Mark Twain or F. Scott Fitzgerald, in fact, or so Samuel believed. He had said it so many times that he wasn't even able to embellish it for dramatic effect, because people would quickly catch on to his bluff. Regardless, Samuel accepted that it was perhaps time to retire this old tale in favor of something new. Honestly, Samuel began, I don't believe that I had much of a personal life outside of running my business. Never married, never even dated. Obviously, that means that I never had any kids of my own. It was just work for me. Just work. I honestly find that hard to believe. Samuel groaned internally. Roger was clearly not going to let him get away with any non-answers. Well, if I were to be honest, it wasn't exactly all work and no play. I did go on a safari or two when I was younger. A safari? In Africa? Unfortunately, I never got to go to Africa for a safari. Such a shame, because I think that an elephant head would fit this living room quite nicely. Well, I have to say, even without such a trophy head, you have a very fine living room. If not Africa, where did you go for your safari? Why, I went to Australia, of course. I was mainly interested in kangaroos, but I wanted to make it extra challenging. I figured a gun wouldn't have been very fun, so I used a hunting knife instead. So what you're saying is that you hunted wild kangaroos armed with nothing but a knife? Wasn't that a little dangerous? It was, but that's what made it exciting. Do you have any idea what it was like running a newspaper company? It was incredibly dull. A newspaper company? Are you referring to General American Industries? Why, yes, of course. I remember when I started that company in my mother's basement. I must have been... It's interesting that you say that, because I don't recall the company ever venturing into the newspaper business. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said earlier that your mother had passed away when you were in France. Was that not the case? There it was again. Another lie. But just like last time, this was completely unintentional. What was going on in the mind of Samuel Monroe to cause him to make such major mistakes? Dementia, perhaps? Everything seemed fine before the interview. Although living by himself, he didn't have anyone around to observe if his mind was going blank. Samuel had strived to keep his mind as sharp as possible, believing that a wasted mind is a wasted man. Had all of his efforts been for nothing? Yes, you are quite right, Samuel said, sounding slightly confused by the whole ordeal. My mother did in fact pass away while I was fighting the Germans. And you are correct. General American Industries never once printed any newspapers. I must be thinking of my business associate, Ralph Harrington. He owned his own paper business, and he went to Australia with me all those years ago. Ralph Harrington, you say? That is again a name that I do not recall finding in my research, although his name does sound vaguely familiar. I wouldn't expect you to know him since his paper was a local one. He owned the Milwaukee Gazette. Now, it might not have had as many readers as your magazine does, but it was enough to earn him a pretty penny. Whatever happened to Ralph Harrington? Are you two still good friends? Oddly enough, I can't quite remember what happened to him. It's almost like right after the safari, he disappeared off the face of the earth. That must be very troubling indeed. I can't imagine what it's like not to be able to remember a dear friend. Yeah, but I don't really feel sad about it. I hate to say it, because I absolutely detest this sort of mushy garbage, but it's almost like even though I can't remember what happened to him, he's still there somewhere inside of me. Well, they say that we never truly forget things. We just lose the ability to recall them. So that makes sense. I wish it didn't. I'm glad that it does. Roger looked at his watch, nodded, and jotted down the time in his notes. Unfortunately, that is about all the time that we have for today. Is there anything else that you wish to say to our readers? Roger asked. I just want to say that this interview was a great honor, and I hope that it lived up to everyone's expectations. I still have plenty of years left to live, and I promise that I won't waste any of it lazing around in my old age. Samuel Monroe is back, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I believe we can call that an interview. Thank you, Mr. Monroe, for joining me today, and I would like to thank all of our dedicated readers for giving us a chance to provide yet another great interview. As always, stand strong. Roger pressed a button, and the reels in the recording machine stopped spinning. To Samuel, it was as if time had paused at that very moment. You see, to him, time had been stagnant ever since he retired. But during that interview, for that brief moment in time and space, it began to move again. It was such a fickle thing, he thought. It made him wonder why he was so hell-bent on trying to fight it. Roger seemed to be in the same exact position after the interview as he was just before it started, scanning through his notes. Samuel could tell that he took his job very seriously, which relieved him because he believed that he was in good hands. Despite his blunders, he was very proud of the interview. He figured that those mistakes would get cut out of the official publication anyway. He looked at Roger, professional as ever, probably picturing the magazine pages in his mind. Roger felt very proud of the interview as well. He had interviewed many people, but none were quite as interesting as Samuel Monroe. He made his way to the end of his notes and signed them off, filling in the blanks of what looked like some sort of form. It read, Patient, Samuel Monroe. Former occupation, author, parentheses, novels and short stories. Medical examiner, Dr. Roger Evans, MD, Milwaukee City Hospital, Department of Psychology.